Hi, I'm Emily Barbie. This is my racial autobiography. A little bit of background. I'm biracial. My mom is Caucasian. My dad is African American. My mom grew up in Illinois in a small town, and she's of Norwegian descent. And my dad, who's African American, grew up in rural Northern California in the 1950s. So my dad, growing up, experienced a lot of racism and injustice due to his race. So race and racism, prejudice, equality and social justice were all things that we talked a lot about in my home from a very early age. Thankfully, I grew up in Berkeley, California, and so racial discrimination and that kind of injustice wasn't something that I ever really experienced throughout my childhood. It was something that I was aware of and I knew about, but I went to a small private school in Berkeley. There were lots of other biracial students there. It was fairly diverse racially, ethnically, culturally, and it was a very accepting place much like Berkeley in general is. It wasn't until my senior year in high school when I had a very negative experience associated with my racial background. I went to show my high school counselor that I'd passed my AP test so that he could enroll me in the AP classes for the next year, and he didn't believe that I'd passed the tests. I had to try to convince him that my test scores were real, and finally he pulled up my grades and saw that I had straight A's and finally enrolled me in the classes. But it was a pretty devastating experience because until then I grew up in a pretty utopian place as it relates to race and racial discrimination. So that was a big eye opener for me. And then that year, I was one of only 3 minority students in my AP classes. So I became very aware on a personal level of how racism can impact institutions and can be systemic. Then I went to college. I went to Pomona College in Claremont. It was kind of like another Berkeley in the sense that it's very accepting of different races and cultures. Um, I was, however, again, one of very few students in terms of percentages of students of African American descent. So again, I was very conscious of how racism can impact institutions. Um, and I was enrolled in a lot of ethnic studies classes where we talked about race and explored the impact of race and slavery and colonialism throughout the African diaspora. Um, Now I've been working in LAUSD for the past 10 years, and many of the leaders who I've worked for have been very racially diverse. Right now, the superintendent of my local district is an African American woman. So thankfully, again, I work in a place much like the college I went to and the town where I grew up, where racial diversity is embraced, where it's the norm. And I haven't had any negative experiences at all associated with my race. I've seen a lot of positive role models that look like me or that come from a similar background as me, and that's been very inspiring. Um, and so, however, I know that many of the students um, that I work with in LAUSD and many of the students that we all work with in LAUSD don't grow up with some of the privileges that I had growing up. I had 2 parents who were college educated. I come from a middle class background. So looking at the impact not just of race in my life, but also the privileges that my parents' level of education and my socioeconomic status, that those things afforded me a lot of privileges that many of the students who I work with and that we serve in LAUSD don't have. And so I'm very passionate about making sure that those students receive a high quality education and fixing schools and making them work for the students that we serve. And so that's why I'm in the SLP program. I'm very passionate about making schools work for the students we serve, making sure that they can become whatever they dream of in life. Um, and so that's that.